The rails are gone now, but traces of the Denver and Rio Grande Railroad's old narrow-gauge main line can still be found along Marshall Pass in Colorado. Built between 1880 and 1881, the 3-foot gauge route climbed to an elevation of approximately 10,846 feet as it crossed the Continental Divide between Salida and Gunnison. The steep grades, sharp curves, heavy snow, and numerous snowsheds made it one of the most challenging railroad routes in the American West. The line was abandoned in the 1950s, and the rails were removed in 1955. Long before the tracks disappeared, however, railroaders told a chilling story about a phantom train that supposedly pursued an engineer across the pass. The legend, published by Charles Montgomery Skinner in his 1896 collection, Myths and Legends of Our Own Land, concerns a Denver and Rio Grande engineer named Nelson Edwards. Although Edwards had crossed Marshall Pass many times without incident, he began one particular nighttime run with an uneasy feeling he could not explain. There were already reasons for him to be concerned. A defective rail and an unsafe bridge had been reported somewhere along the route. Nevertheless, Edwards guided his passenger train into the mountains and began the long climb toward the Continental Divide. As the train emerged from a line of snow-covered sheds, Edwards heard a whistle echoing through the darkness behind him. At almost the same moment, the signal gong sounded inside his cab. Believing the conductor had ordered him to stop, Edwards applied the brakes and the heavy train ground to a halt. A few moments later, the conductor came running toward the locomotive.
Why did you stop?
Because you signaled me to stop.
The conductor stared at him. He had given no such signal. Instead, he ordered Edwards to get the train moving immediately. They had to reach the siding to meet train number 19, and another train appeared to be climbing the mountain behind them. Now, thoroughly unnerved, Edwards opened the throttle. The locomotive's driving wheels slipped briefly on the icy rails before gaining traction. His firemen shoveled coal furiously into the firebox as the heavy train slowly gathered speed. Then another whistle sounded behind them. This time it was louder and closer. As the train rounded a curve, Edwards looked back and saw the outline of another locomotive racing up the mountain. It was traveling much faster than his own train, and at that rate, a collision seemed inevitable. Edwards pulled the throttle wide open. His locomotive charged forward, crashing through snowdrifts and roaring into the darkness. The passenger cars rocked violently as they raced across the rough track and through the snow-clogged sheds. At any moment, the train might leave the rails and plunge into one of the canyons below. Yet Edwards did not dare reduce his speed. The train behind him was still gaining. The passengers had awakened and were peering anxiously through the windows. A frightening rumor spread from coach to coach. A runaway train was behind them, driven by a mad engineer who seemed determined to cause a collision. Edwards' train finally reached the summit of Marshall Pass. He shut off the steam and allowed gravity to pull the train down the western slope. Looking back through the falling snow, he saw that the pursuing locomotive had driving wheels larger than those on his own engine. A tall figure stood on top of one of its cars, waving frantically. The track curved sharply ahead. When Edwards looked back again, the other train was only a few hundred yards away. Then he saw something that chilled him more deeply than the mountain air. The engineer of the pursuing locomotive was leaning out of his cab and laughing. His face was unnaturally white and lifeless, like the face of a corpse. The chase continued down the mountain. Snow swirled around the locomotives, bridges trembled beneath their weight, and the wind screamed past the passenger cars. Edwards soon reached the bridge that had been reported unsafe. He knew he should slow down, but the phantom train was almost upon him. With his heart in his throat, he kept the throttle open. His locomotive thundered across the bridge, and the passenger cars lurched behind it. Somehow, the weakened structure held. Ahead, Edwards could see the switch lamp marking the siding where he was supposed to meet train number 19. To his horror, number 19 was not waiting there. The opposing train might already be coming toward him, placing his passengers in danger of being struck from either direction. Just beyond the switch, a red lantern suddenly appeared in the darkness. Someone, or something, was swinging it back and forth across the track, the railroad signal for danger ahead. Edwards had no choice. Better to risk being struck from behind than to plunge into an unseen obstruction. He reversed the locomotive and applied the brakes. The wheels screamed against the rails as the train slowed. Edwards braced himself for the impact he knew must come. He expected at any moment to hear the splintering of wood and the screams of passengers as the pursuing locomotive crashed into the rear coaches. But the collision never came. Edwards looked back. The phantom train was only yards away and seemed ready to overtake them. Then, just before its locomotive reached the rear car, the rails beneath it appeared to spread apart. The ghostly engine toppled from the track and rolled down the mountainside. One after another, its cars followed, tumbling into the black canyon below until the entire train vanished from sight. Edwards waited for the crash. He expected to hear twisting metal, bursting steam, or the cries of injured men rising from the canyon. He heard nothing. There was only the mournful sound of the wind moving through the darkness. When Edwards turned toward the track ahead, he discovered that the red warning lantern had also vanished. But his ordeal was not over. Train number 19 was still somewhere ahead, and Edwards had to reach the next siding before the opposing train entered the single-track section. He started his locomotive again and raced toward the switch. This time, he reached the siding safely, and number 19 passed without incident. Edwards continued his run to Green River, Utah, arriving the following morning ahead of schedule. As he prepared to leave the locomotive, he noticed words traced into the frost covering one of the cab windows. The message read, "A freight train was wrecked as you saw. Now that you saw it, you will never make another run. The engine was not under control and 4 section men were killed. If you ever run on this road again, you will be wrecked." The words appeared to warn that a freight train had once wrecked in the same canyon, killing 4 section workers. Now that Edwards had witnessed the disaster, the message claimed he would be killed if he ever operated another train over the route. For Edwards, it was enough. According to the legend, he resigned from the Denver and Rio Grande that very morning, returned to Denver, and found employment with the Union Pacific Railroad. Railroad workers searched the canyon the following day, but they found no wreckage, bodies, or other evidence that a train had plunged from the tracks. There also appears to be no historical documentation confirming that 4 section workers died in such an accident, although 2 railroaders were killed in a genuine wreck on Marshall Pass in November 1888. Whether Nelson Edwards actually experienced something supernatural, or whether the entire account was simply a tale shared by railroaders on cold Colorado nights, may never be known. According to the story, however, the phantom train of Marshall Pass was never seen again.